The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Ambassador Hana sat in her chair, watching the massive screen that showed star maps from across the galaxy. She had been to many meetings like this one, but something felt different today. The key. Other ambassadors looked worried. Their usual calm faces showed fear. Hana was the only human in the room. Around her sat representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Velthari looked like living crystals, their bodies shining with soft blue light. The Nephites floated in their special gas tanks, their tentacle-like arms moving slowly through the mist. The Karathi moved as one group, their shared mind making them speak in perfect harmony. For 50 years, these species had ruled the galaxy with their advanced technology and peaceful ways. They solved problems with talk, not fighting. War was something they had left behind long ago. Violence was ugly and primitive to them. But today, everything changed. The main screen flickered and came to life. Static filled the air, then cleared, to show a desperate face. The being on the screen had features like a bird with large golden eyes and feathers that shimmered in the light. Its voice was high and musical, but filled with terror. "This is Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet," the bird-like alien said. "Our worlds are under attack. The enemy is unlike anything we have ever seen. They are machines. But they live, they eat our cities, our people, our very planets. We have lost 3 worlds already. Millions are dead." The image shook as explosions echoed in the background. "They adapt to our weapons faster than we can create new ones. Our energy shields mean nothing to them. They learn from every attack and become stronger. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help. We are the Zephyrian Collective and we are dying." The transmission ended. The hall fell silent again. Hana felt her hands clench into fists. She had seen war before. She knew what desperation looked like, what it sounded like. These people were facing extinction, and they had reached out to the galaxy for help. The crystal being who led the Velthari Council spoke first. Its voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "This is troubling news. The Ravager swarm has been a legend for centuries. We thought they were destroyed long ago." "The reports are concerning," agreed the Nephite ambassador, its words bubbling through the gas in its tank. "But we must be careful. The Ravagers are said to be highly dangerous. Any military action could make them stronger." The Karathi spoke as one, their voices joining together. "We agree. Direct confrontation with such enemies would be unwise. We should study the situation first. Perhaps we can find a diplomatic solution." Hana listened as the debate continued. Each species had reasons why they could not help immediately. The Velthari were afraid their crystal ships would be turned into weapons by the adaptive enemy. The Nephites worried that their gas-based technology would be consumed and copied. The Karathi feared that their hive mind might be infected by the machine intelligence. Hours passed. The council talked about options, about risks, about the need for careful planning. They formed committees to study the problem. They scheduled meetings to discuss possible responses. They did everything except actually help the dying Zephyrians. Hana had heard enough. She stood up from her chair. The sound of her movement echoed in the quiet hall. All eyes turned to her. In this room full of advanced aliens, she looked small and primitive. Her simple uniform was plain compared to their exotic appearances. But her eyes burned with something they had forgotten. "With respect to the council," Hana said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "while you debate and study and plan, an entire species is being wiped out." The Velthari leader's light flickered with annoyance. "Ambassador Hana, you must understand the complexity of this situation. We cannot simply rush into battle against an unknown enemy." "Unknown?" Hana asked. "We just watched them beg for help. We know they are dying. We know they need aid now, not after months of committee meetings." "Your species is young," the Nephite said condescendingly. "You do not understand the delicate balance required for galactic peace. Violence only creates more violence." Hana felt anger rise in her chest. She thought about Earth, her home world that these aliens called a death world. They said it with distaste, as if coming from a dangerous planet made humans lesser beings. They looked down on human military strength, calling it primitive and barbaric. "You are right," she said calmly. "My species is young. We come from a world you call dangerous. We fight wars you think are savage. But we know something you seem to have forgotten." She turned to address the entire council. "We know that sometimes the only way to save lives is to risk your own. We know that while you sit here talking, people are dying, and we know that someone has to be willing to stand up to bullies, even when it is dangerous." The hall erupted in shocked voices. The aliens spoke over each other, expressing outrage at her words. How dare a human question their wisdom? How could such a primitive species understand the complexities of galactic politics? Hana waited for the noise to die down. When silence returned, she spoke again. "The humans will answer this call." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The Velthari leader's light pulsed rapidly with anger. "Ambassador Hana, your species does not have the authority to act without council approval. Any military action must be voted on and approved by the majority." "Then let us vote," Hana said simply. The vote was swift and predictable. Every species voted against military intervention. The official record would show that the Galactic Council had decided to monitor the situation and explore diplomatic solutions. Hana listened to the vote with a calm expression. When it was over, she stood up again and walked to the center of the hall. From her uniform, she pulled out a small device that looked simple compared to the advanced technology around her. "This is Ambassador Hana. Authorization code Alpha 77, she said into the device. Her voice was now being broadcast on emergency frequencies across human space. "I am declaring Condition Crimson under the Human Defense Charter." The aliens watched in confusion. They had never heard of this code before. Hana continued speaking into the device. "A sentient species is facing extinction. The Zephyrian Collective has requested aid, and the Galactic Council has refused to act. As of this moment, humanity is formally withdrawing from Council military oversight. All available ships, all volunteer crews, all defense forces are ordered to assemble at Sol System immediately." She paused, looking around the shocked faces of the alien ambassadors. "To any human ship receiving this transmission, innocent people are dying, and we have the power to help them. Report to Earth within 72 hours. We have work to do." Hana turned off the device and placed it back in her uniform. The hall was completely silent. The aliens stared at her as if she had gone insane. "You cannot do this," the Velthari leader said, its light now pulsing bright red with rage. "Your species will be expelled from the council. You will lose all trade agreements, all diplomatic protections." Hana looked at the crystal being with sad eyes. "You still do not understand. When someone calls for help, you answer. Everything else comes second." She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast hall. At the door, she stopped and looked back one last time. "The Zephyrians asked for help, and they will get it. When this is over, you can decide if you want us back in your council, but right now we have people to save." As the door closed behind her, Hana heard the aliens beginning to argue among themselves. They were probably trying to figure out how to stop the humans, how to maintain their precious stability and order. But Hana was already thinking ahead. She knew her people. She knew that right now, across human space, ships were changing course toward Earth. Military vessels, merchant ships, even private yachts were responding to the call. They did not know what they would face, but they knew that somewhere in the galaxy, people needed help. And humans always answered when someone needed help. That was what made them different from everyone else in this civilized galaxy. The emergency beacon from Ambassador Hana reached every corner of human space within hours. On military bases, cargo ships, mining stations, and frontier colonies, people stopped what they were doing to listen to the message. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Taman was inspecting his exploration ship Soul's Pride when the call came through. His communications officer, Sora, rushed onto the bridge with her face pale but determined. "Captain, We just received a condition crimson alert, she said, handing him the decoded message. Ambassador Hana is calling for all available ships to gather at Sol system. Taemin read the message twice. His ship was designed for peaceful exploration, not combat. It carried scientific equipment, not weapons. By any military standard, Sol's pride had no business answering a call to war. Plot a course for Earth, he told Sora. Maximum speed. Sir, we are not a warship, Sora reminded him. We have no weapons, no armor, no trained fighters. Taemin looked at her with steady eyes. We have engines, we have courage, and we have people who need our help. That will have to be enough. Similar conversations were happening across human space. Admiral Dong Ha commanded the largest military fleet in human history from his flagship, Eternal Vigilance. When the alert reached him, his officers expected him to begin careful preparations, to analyze the threat, and plan accordingly. Instead, he ordered his entire fleet to jump immediately. Admiral, his tactical officer protested, we know nothing about this enemy. Should we not gather intelligence first? The intelligence we need is simple, Dong Ha replied. People are dying, and we can help them. Everything else we will figure out on the way. The response was not limited to official military forces. Yujin commanded a massive cargo hauler called Busan Thunder. Her ship was designed to carry trade goods between star systems, not to fight wars. But when the call came, she ordered her crew to begin welding armor plates to their hull and mounting mining lasers as weapons. Captain, this is crazy, her chief engineer said as he watched civilian workers turning their peaceful ship into something that looked like it belonged in a battle. We are not soldiers. No, Yujin agreed. We are something better. We are humans who choose to help. The most surprising response came from Chang Min, leader of the Human Mercenary Guild. His organization was made up of reformed pirates, former soldiers, and professional fighters who worked for money, not causes. Yet when Chang Min announced that the guild would answer Hana's call without payment, every single member volunteered. We have spent years being paid to fight, Chang Min told his assembled captains. This time, we fight for something that actually matters. Even civilian ships answered the call. Mi-young commanded a passenger liner that carried tourists between human worlds. Her ship had no weapons at all, just luxury cabins and entertainment decks. But she too turned her ship toward Earth. What can we do? Her first officer asked. We cannot fight machines that adapt to weapons. We can carry supplies, Mi-young said. We can rescue survivors. We can show the galaxy that humans do not abandon people who need help. Within 48 hours, the space around Earth looked like nothing anyone had ever seen. Military dreadnoughts floated next to converted cargo ships. Sleek fighters shared space with mining vessels that had been hastily armed. Passenger liners loaded with medical supplies docked alongside ships that looked like they had been built from scrap metal and determination. The alien observers stationed near Earth to monitor human activity sent frantic reports back to their governments. Never before had they seen such a massive mobilization happen so quickly. The humans had assembled a fleet of nearly 10,000 ships without any central planning, without months of preparation, without even knowing exactly what they would face. The Galactic Council received these reports with growing alarm. Emergency sessions were called. Diplomatic protests were filed. The crystal beings of the Velthari sent formal complaints about humans violating 17 different peace treaties. By assembling such a large military force, Ambassador Hana ignored them all. She stood on the bridge of Admiral Dong Ha's flagship, watching as more ships arrived every hour. Some were so old they should have been scrapped decades ago. Others were so new their paint was still fresh. Some were obvious warships bristling with weapons. Others looked like they had been built in someone's garage. But they all had one thing in common. They had come because someone needed help. The Council is demanding explanations, Jin Woo, Hana's aide, reported as he read the latest diplomatic messages. They say we are violating every agreement about military mobilization. Tell them we are not mobilizing for war, Hana replied calmly. We are mobilizing for rescue. Admiral Dongha joined them on the bridge, his weathered face serious but determined. He was a veteran of the Titan Wars, where humans had fought against automated mining machines that had gone rogue. He understood better than most what they might face. "Ambassador, we have almost 10,000 ships ready to jump," he reported. "But I must tell you, most of them are not warships. We have cargo haulers with welded-on armor, passenger ships carrying medical supplies, and mining vessels with jury-rigged weapons. Against an enemy like the Ravagers, many of these ships will not survive." Hana nodded. "I know, but they came anyway. That says something about who we are." Dongha smiled grimly. "Yes, it does. It says we are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Hana admitted. The final ship to arrive was perhaps the most surprising of all. The vessel looked ancient, its hull scarred by decades of use. It was clearly a civilian transport not built for combat. But as it approached the gathering fleet, its identification signal revealed something remarkable. It was captained by Kyung-soo, an 80-year-old retired teacher who had spent his life educating human children on a peaceful colony world. His ship carried no weapons, no armor, no military equipment at all. Instead, it was loaded with books, games, and toys. "Control, this is Captain Kyung-soo requesting permission to join the fleet," came the old man's voice over the communications system. "Captain, what is your intended role in this mission?" the fleet coordinator asked. "Someone will need to take care of the children we rescue," Kyung-soo replied simply. As the final preparations were made, Admiral Dongha addressed the entire fleet. His voice was broadcast to every ship, from the largest dreadnought to the smallest courier vessel. Soldiers, merchants, miners, teachers, and volunteers all listened to his words. "People of Earth and humans everywhere," Dongha began. "We are about to undertake a journey that may cost many of us our lives. We go to fight an enemy that adapts to any weapon, that turns our own technology against us, that has already destroyed entire worlds." He paused, looking out at the incredible sight of 10,000 ships ready to jump into danger for people they had never met. "The galaxy calls us Deathworlders. They say we come from a planet where everything tries to kill everything else. They say this makes us violent, primitive, dangerous. Perhaps they are right. Earth has made us hard. It has taught us to fight for survival, to never give up, to protect what matters most." His voice grew stronger. "But Earth has taught us something else. It has taught us that life is precious exactly because it is fragile. It has taught us that the strong must protect the weak, that when someone calls for help, you answer, no matter the cost." Throughout the fleet, humans nodded in agreement. They understood. They had all grown up on the same dangerous world, learned the same hard lessons, developed the same stubborn refusal to abandon those who needed help. "The Zephyrians do not know us," Dongha continued. "They do not know that we come from a world that tried to kill us every day. They do not know that we learned to fight by fighting our own planet. They do not know that we measure success not by what we gain, but by what we protect." He took a deep breath. "But the Ravagers are about to learn all of this. They think they understand warfare because they have defeated civilized species with civilized weapons. They are about to discover what happens when Deathworlders decide that someone needs protection." The fleet began to power up their jump drives. 10,000 ships of every size and type prepared to leap across space to a battle they might not survive. "All ships, this is Admiral Dongha. Jump drives ready. Target, Zephyrian system. Mission, save everyone we can. Method, whatever it takes." He paused one final time, his voice carrying the determination of his entire species. "The aliens in peril called for help. The Deathworlder fleet is coming. Let us show the galaxy what humans do when innocents are threatened. All ships jump." Space around Earth erupted in brilliant flashes of light as 10,000 ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of one species and the desperate prayers of another. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system and immediately encountered a nightmare that defied imagination. Space itself seemed infected with mechanical disease. Captain Hyun Woo commanded the scout ship Incheon, Runner, one of the fastest vessels in the human fleet. His job was to get close, assess the situation, and report back to Admiral Dong Ha. What he saw made him question his own sanity. "Control, this is Scout 1. Hyunwoo spoke into his communication system, trying to keep his voice steady. "Visual contact with the enemy. I need to repeat that transmission because I do not think you will believe it the first time." 3. Of the system's 5 planets were gone, not destroyed, consumed. In their place floated massive mechanical structures that pulsed with sickly light. These were not ships or stations built by any recognizable technology. They were organic machines, living metal that grew and shifted like cancer. "They have turned entire worlds into processing nodes," reported Yoon Seo, his tactical officer. Her voice was tight with horror. "The readings show these structures are actively mining the planetary cores while building new machines." Closer to the system's center, the 2 remaining planets were under siege. Zephyrian ships, elegant vessels, that looked like crystalline birds in flight, fled desperately from pursuing horrors. The Ravager hunter-killers were not ships in any sense humans understood. They were living weapons that changed shape as they fought, adapting their forms to become more deadly with each encounter. "Sir, incoming distress signal from a Zephyrian vessel," reported Sora from the communications station. The transmission crackled with static and interference. Through the noise came a voice speaking in the musical language of the bird-like aliens, translated by the ship's computer. "This is Captain Corthan of the evacuation ship Windcaller. We carry 3,000 civilians, mostly children. Our engines are failing and the hunters are closing in. If anyone receives this message, please help us. We do not want to die." Hyunwoo looked at his crew. The Incheon runner was a scout ship, fast but lightly armed. The Ravager hunter-killers pursuing the Zephyrian vessel were each 3 times his size and covered in adaptive armor that shifted and changed as he watched. Any sane military commander would have reported the situation and waited for backup. Any reasonable captain would have avoided a fight he could not win. Hyun-Woo was human. "All hands battle stations," he ordered. "Sora, send a message to the Zephyrian ship. Tell them help is coming." "Captain, we cannot win against those things," Yunseo protested. "Our weapons are no match for adaptive armor." "Then we will have to be creative," Hyunwoo replied with a grim smile. "Plot an intercept course, maximum speed, and prepare to ram." The Incheon runner accelerated toward the fleeing Zephyrian ship. The 3 Ravager hunter-killers detected the approaching human vessel and immediately began to adapt. Their hulls shifted, growing new weapon systems and armor configurations designed to counter the scout ship's armament. The Ravagers had fought the elegant Zephyrian fleet for months. They had adapted to energy weapons, plasma cannons, and particle beams. They knew how to counter every weapon system used by civilized species. They were not prepared for humans. Instead of firing his weapons, Hyunwoo rammed the Incheon runner directly into the lead hunter-killer at maximum speed. The impact tore both ships apart, but the sacrifice bought precious time for the Zephyrian evacuation vessel to escape. The remaining Ravager ships paused, their adaptive systems trying to process what had just happened. In their experience, military vessels attempted to preserve themselves while attacking enemies. This concept of deliberately destroying one's own ship as an attack was completely foreign to them. Admiral Dong Ha received Hyunwoo's final transmission and felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. The young captain had given his life to save civilians he had never met. It was the most human thing imaginable. "All ships, advance into the system," Dong Ha ordered. "Combat formation. The Ravagers are about to learn what happens when they threaten innocents in front of Deathworlders." The human fleet moved forward in a formation that would have horrified any military academy instructor. There was no elegant coordination, no sophisticated tactical deployment. Instead, 10,000 ships, of every size and type, simply charged toward the enemy with grim determination. The Ravagers responded immediately. Their adaptive systems had learned from their encounters with the Zephyrians. They deployed energy weapons designed to counter Zephyrian shields, launched guided missiles programmed to track bird-like ship movements, and activated jamming systems. tuned to disrupt Zephyrian communication frequencies. None of it worked against the humans. The human ships used kinetic weapons, simple railguns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. When the Ravagers adapted their armor to stop railgun rounds, the humans switched to nuclear missiles. When the Ravagers learned to intercept missiles, human ships began ramming attacks. Captain Yujin, commanding the converted cargo hauler Busan Thunder, found herself facing a Ravager cruiser that had adapted specifically to counter her ship's mining laser. The alien machine had grown reflective armor that bounced the laser back at her own ship. "Captain, our weapons are useless," her gunnery officer reported. Jin smiled coldly. "Then we will use their adaptation against them. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. But first, fire every mining laser we have at that thing's armor." The Busan Thunder's lasers struck the Ravager cruiser, which confidently absorbed the energy and reflected it back. But Yujin had expected this. As the reflected energy bounced harmlessly off her ship's own armor, she accelerated directly toward the Ravager. The alien machine's adaptive systems, focused on perfecting its laser reflection, did not anticipate a multi-thousand-ton cargo hauler slamming into it at ramming speed. The impact crippled both vessels, but Yujin's sacrifice disabled a ship 10 times more powerful than her own. Throughout the system, similar scenes played out. Human ships fought with a brutality that shocked both allies and enemies. Marines led by Colonel Jae Sung boarded Ravager vessels not to capture them, but to plant explosives in their cores and detonate them from within. Medical officer Su Jin worked frantically to treat Zephyrian refugees, learning their alien anatomy on the fly while their world died around them. The bird-like aliens were amazed that strangers would risk their lives to help them, but they were also horrified by the human willingness to die for others. "Why do they fight this way?" asked a wounded Zephyrian pilot as Su Jin treated his injuries. "Why do they sacrifice themselves for us?" Su Jin looked up from her medical scanner. "Because you asked for help," she said simply. And humans always answer when someone needs help. The battle raged for hours. Human ships fell by the hundreds, but their sacrifices were not in vain. Each death bought time for more Zephyrian civilians to escape. Each ramming attack disabled Ravager vessels that might have destroyed entire evacuation fleets. But the humans were learning too. They discovered that Ravagers adapted to patterns, so they embraced chaos. Fighter pilots like Wu Jin developed pack hunting tactics, attacking in random groups with no predictable formation. Engineer Nara showed cargo haulers how to weaponize their industrial equipment, turning mining ships into improvised bombers. The Ravagers found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their experience. These humans did not fight to win in any conventional sense. They fought to protect, to rescue, to save lives even at the cost of their own. Their tactics made no sense from a survival standpoint, but they were devastatingly effective. As the battle continued, more Ravager reinforcements arrived from the outer system. Massive processing ships, each the size of a moon, began moving toward the remaining Zephyrian worlds. These were not hunter-killers designed for ship-to-ship combat. They were planet devourers, built to consume entire worlds and turn them into raw materials for more machines. Admiral Dong Ha watched the enemy reinforcements approach and felt a cold fury settle in his heart. These machines had already eaten 3 worlds. They had killed billions of innocent beings. And now they thought they could finish the job while humans watched. He was about to show them how wrong they were. "All ships. This is Admiral Dong Ha," he broadcast to the entire fleet. "Enemy reinforcements are approaching. These are the ships that ate the Zephyrian worlds, that murdered billions of innocents. They think we will run when we see their true strength." He paused, watching as his battered fleet prepared for what might be their final battle. They are about to learn what Deathworlders do to bullies. "All ships, combat formation Reaper. We are not running, we are not retreating. We are going to teach these machines why the galaxy should fear a species that refuses to abandon the innocent." The human fleet, reduced now to barely 6,000 ships, turned toward the approaching Ravager planet killers. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that adapted to every tactic. None of that mattered. Somewhere behind them, Zephyrian children were depending on them to hold the line. and humans always held the line when children were in danger. The battle for the Zephyrian system entered its most desperate phase as massive Ravager planet killers moved toward the remaining worlds. These machines were not ships in any recognizable sense. They were living factories the size of moons, designed to consume entire planets and turn them into more weapons. Admiral Dong Ha stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as his fleet prepared to face impossible odds. The human forces had been reduced from 10,000 ships to barely 6,000. Many of those were damaged, running on backup power, and held together by determination and spare parts. The Ravagers had adapted to human tactics throughout the battle. Their armor now resisted ramming attacks. Their weapons had learned to target human weak points. Their formation patterns had adjusted to counter the chaotic human fighting style. But the Ravagers had made one crucial mistake. They thought they understood what they were fighting. All ships, listen carefully, Dong Ha broadcast to his fleet. The enemy thinks they have figured us out. They have adapted to our weapons, our tactics, our formations. They believe they are ready for anything we can do. He smiled grimly as he looked out at the approaching mechanical horrors. They have never fought Deathworlders before. They do not understand that we are not fighting to win. We are fighting to protect, and there is no adaptation that can counter pure human stubbornness. Captain Kyung-ho commanded a squadron of volunteer ships that had been converted into suicide bombers. These were not military vessels. They were cargo haulers, passenger liners, even personal yachts that had been loaded with explosives and piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive the mission. Bomber Squadron 7 ready for deployment, Kyung-ho reported. His voice was calm, but everyone listening knew what his mission meant. He and his pilots would fly directly into the planet killers and detonate their ships inside the enemy hulls. Kyung-ho, are you certain about this? Admiral Dong Ha asked. The two men had served together in the Titan Wars decades ago. They were old friends. I am certain, Kyung-ho replied. My children are grown. My wife died years ago, and I have seen enough of life. But these Zephyrian youngsters deserve to see what life has to offer. This seems like a good trade. Nara, an engineer on the cargo ship Iron Mountain, was making her own preparations. Her vessel had been loaded with industrial mining charges, explosives designed to crack apart asteroids for mineral extraction. She had spent the last hour turning them into the largest improvised bomb in human history. Engineering to bridge, she reported. I have successfully connected all mining charges to a single detonator. When this goes off, it will crack a small moon in half. Her captain looked at the readings in disbelief. Nara, this will destroy our ship completely. There is no way to survive detonating that much explosive. I know, Nara replied calmly. But it will also destroy whatever Ravager ship we ram it into. Seems like a fair trade to me. Fighter pilot Wu Jin was developing new tactics based on a simple principle. If the enemy adapted to patterns, then humans would abandon all patterns. His squadron had stopped using any coordinated attacks, any predictable formations, any logical strategies. Instead, they flew like a swarm of angry insects, attacking from random directions at random times with random weapons. Some pilots fired missiles, others used lasers, still others simply rammed their fighters into Ravager weak points. There was no way for the adaptive systems to counter tactics that had no consistency. Wolf Pack leader to all fighters. Wu Jin broadcast. Remember, we are not pilots anymore. We are wasps defending our nest. Sting anything that moves from any direction with whatever you have. Make them afraid to get close. Demolitions expert. Hyrim was leading a boarding party onto a damaged Ravager cruiser. Her mission was not to capture the ship or gather intelligence. Her job was to plant explosives in critical systems and then detonate them, while the Ravagers were still trying to repair the damage. Demo Team 3, inside the target, she reported as her Marines fought their way through corridors that kept changing shape around them. The ship is actively trying to heal itself. Perfect. That means all its adaptive systems are focused on repair instead of defense. Her team planted charges in the Ravager's power core, navigation systems, and weapon batteries. As alarms began to sound and mechanical defenders converged on their position, Hyrim activated the detonator. The explosion tore the Ravager cruiser apart from within, taking Hiram and her team with it. But their sacrifice disabled a ship that could have destroyed dozens of human vessels throughout the battle. The humans employed tactics that horrified both their enemies and their Zephyrian allies. They turned cargo ships into bombs, fighters into missiles, and industrial equipment into weapons. They fought with a disregard for their own safety that seemed insane to any logical observer. But there was logic to their madness. Every human death bought time for Zephyrian civilians to escape. Every sacrificial attack damaged enemies that were individually more powerful than anything in the human fleet. Every act of desperate heroism moved the galaxy one step closer to safety. The Ravagers began to show something they had never displayed before: hesitation. Their adaptive systems were designed to counter logical military tactics, not the controlled chaos of human warfare. They could adapt to energy weapons, but not to ships deliberately ramming them. They could counter missile attacks, but not pilots, who turned their fighters into guided bombs. Most importantly, they could not adapt to human psychology. The Ravagers understood self-preservation, efficiency, and logical tactical thinking. They had no programming that could account for beings who would sacrifice everything to protect strangers. Captain Yu Jin, her cargo hauler Busan Thunder barely holding together after multiple ramming attacks, made contact with one of the massive planet killers. Her ship was tiny compared to the moon-sized machine, but she had a plan that depended on human ingenuity rather than firepower. "Engineering, prepare to vent all our cargo holds," she ordered. "Captain, our cargo is industrial chemicals and raw metals," her chief engineer protested. "Venting them into space will create a massive cloud of debris and toxic gases." "Exactly," Eugen replied. "And while that planet killer is trying to adapt its sensors to see through the cloud, we are going to fly right into its central processing core and introduce it to the concept of nuclear detonation." The Busan Thunder released its entire cargo load, creating a toxic cloud that disrupted sensors and made targeting impossible. While the Ravager planet killer struggled to adapt its systems to the unexpected interference, Eugen piloted her ship directly into its hull and detonated every nuclear warhead she carried. The explosion was visible from across the system, a brilliant star that marked the death of both the human cargo ship and the moon-sized enemy machine. As the battle raged, the Ravagers made one final attempt to understand their enemies. The Central Ravager Intelligence, a vast artificial mind called the Queen Node, tried to establish communication with Admiral Dong-Ha. The transmission that came through the fleet's communications system was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It was not a voice in any normal sense, but a complex pattern of data that their computers translated into words. "Human Admiral," the Queen Node said, its translated voice echoing with electronic harmonics. "Your tactics are illogical. Your ships are inferior to ours. Your weapons cannot match our adaptive technology, yet you continue to fight battles you cannot win. Explain this behavior." Admiral Dong-Ha looked at the communication display for a long moment. Around him, the battle continued. Human ships died by the dozens, but each death weakened the Ravager fleet and saved Zephyrian lives. "You want to understand us?" Dong-Ha replied. "You have spent months fighting civilized species with civilized weapons. You adapted to their energy cannons, their elegant tactics, their sophisticated strategies. You thought you had learned everything there was to know about warfare." The Queen Node processed this information. "Correct. We have analyzed and countered all known military technologies and strategies. Your resistance is inefficient and costly." Dong-Ha's voice grew cold with anger. "You made a mistake, machine. You hurt people we decided to protect. Children, families, innocent beings who never did anything to deserve what you did to them." He paused, watching as another human ship rammed itself into a Ravager cruiser, destroying both vessels. "Now you get to learn why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. We do not fight wars the way civilized species do. We do not care about efficiency, or cost-effectiveness, or logical tactics. We fight like cornered animals protecting our young, and there is no adaptation that can counter a species that would rather die than let innocents suffer." The Queen Node fell silent, its vast intelligence struggling to process the concept of beings who would choose certain death over strategic retreat. Around the system, the tide of battle began to turn. The Ravagers, for all their adaptive abilities, were learning a hard lesson about fighting an enemy that refused to be logical. Human tactics made no sense from a strategic standpoint, but they were devastatingly effective against machines that expected rational behavior. More importantly, the human fleet was buying time. Every minute of desperate fighting allowed more Zephyrian evacuation ships to escape to safety. The final battle for the Zephyrian system lasted 18 hours and cost the human fleet 70% of its ships. When the last Ravager vessel finally went dark, fewer than 3,000 human ships remained from the original 10,000. That had answered Ambassador Hana's call. Captain Si-Hoon commanded one of the surviving vessels, a battered destroyer called Dagu's Resolve. His ship had been through 7 separate ramming attacks, held together now by emergency patches and the stubborn refusal of his crew to give up. As he surveyed the aftermath of the battle, he felt a mixture of grief and pride that would stay with him forever. The space around the Zephyrian worlds was filled with debris from both fleets. Human ships drifted powerless next to the twisted remains of Ravager machines. But floating among the wreckage were hundreds of Zephyrian evacuation vessels, packed with survivors who had been saved by human sacrifice. Communications, establish contact with the evacuation fleet, Si-Hoon ordered. Find out how many we managed to save. His communications officer, a young woman named Aram, worked at her station with tears streaming down her face. Like everyone in the fleet, she had watched friends die throughout the long battle. But when her readings came through, her expression brightened with something approaching wonder. "Captain, we did it," she said, her voice full of amazement. "The evacuation fleet reports over 2 million Zephyrian civilians reached safety. We saved them. We actually saved them." The cost had been terrible. 7,000 human ships destroyed, nearly 50,000 people dead. An entire fleet sacrificed for strangers they had never met. But 2 million innocents lived because humans had refused to abandon them. Admiral Dong Ha, his flagship barely functional, opened communications to the entire surviving fleet. His voice was hoarse with exhaustion, but it carried the quiet satisfaction of a job completed. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Dong Ha. The Ravager Queen node has been destroyed. The remaining enemy units are scattered and fleeing the system. The immediate threat to the Zephyrian people has been eliminated." He paused, looking out at the wreckage that had once been the most beautiful fleet in human history. "We came here to answer a call for help. Mission accomplished. Now we have new work to do." What happened next surprised everyone who witnessed it. Instead of departing the system to return home, the surviving human ships began organizing relief efforts. Cargo vessels that had come to fight now delivered medical supplies and construction equipment. Warships used their fabrication facilities to produce emergency shelters and food processors. The transformation was remarkable. Ships designed for war became tools of rebuilding. Military personnel became aid workers. The same humans who had fought with terrifying brutality now worked with gentle care to help traumatized refugees. Ayun, a diplomat who had volunteered for the mission, established contact with the Zephyrian leadership. The bird-like aliens were struggling to understand what had happened to them. Their entire civilization had been nearly destroyed, their worlds consumed, their people scattered across space. "We do not know how to thank you," said Commander Veltar, the Zephyrian officer whose original distress call had started everything. "Your people sacrificed so much for strangers. This is beyond our understanding." Ji-un smiled sadly. "You do not need to understand it. You just need to know that you are not alone. We will help you rebuild." The work of reconstruction began immediately. Human engineers studied the damaged Zephyrian homeworld, determining what could be salvaged and what needed to be rebuilt from scratch. The planet's surface was scarred by Ravager processing facilities, but the core was intact. Marine Colonel Minho, who had survived the boarding actions against Ravager ships, found himself leading construction crews instead of combat units. His Marines traded their weapons for building tools and worked alongside Zephyrian civilians to clear debris and establish temporary shelters. This is strange work for soldiers, observed a young Zephyrian as he watched humans and aliens working together to build emergency housing. This is the most important work soldiers can do, Minho replied. Anyone can destroy things. It takes real skill to build them. Captain Mi Young's passenger liner had been converted into a mobile hospital during the battle. Now it served as a refugee center, providing temporary homes for Zephyrian families who had lost everything. Her crew, trained to serve tourists, learned to care for traumatized children and grieving parents. The little ones do not understand what happened to their world, Mi Young told her medical officer, as they watched human and Zephyrian children playing together in the ship's recreation areas. But they are learning to trust again. Young Officer Aram, who had witnessed the entire battle, found herself assigned to help establish communication networks between the scattered refugee fleets. As she worked, she often thought about the price that had been paid for this moment of hope. Was it worth it? She asked Captain Si-hoon one day, as they watched construction crews working to repair a damaged Zephyrian habitat. Si-hoon considered the question carefully. 7,000 ships, 50,000 lives, the largest fleet in human history destroyed in a single battle. He paused. But look around you. 2 million people are alive because we were willing to pay that price. Children are playing. Families are reuniting. A species that was facing extinction now has a future. He smiled. What do you think? Aram looked at the scene around them. Human and Zephyrian children were indeed playing together, their laughter echoing through the habitat corridors. Parents from both species watched with expressions of hope that had seemed impossible just days before. I think we did what humans do, she said simply. The reconstruction effort caught the attention of the Galactic Council, which had been watching the situation with growing alarm and amazement. The same species they had dismissed as primitive Deathworlders was now leading the largest humanitarian effort in galactic history. Ambassador Hana, who had remained in the system to coordinate the relief work, received a formal communication from the Council demanding explanations for human actions. Ambassador Hana, the message read, the Human Defense Force has violated numerous treaties, assembled an unauthorized military fleet, and engaged in warfare without Council approval. Furthermore, your species is now establishing permanent settlements in the Zephyrian system without proper diplomatic protocols. Explain these actions immediately. Hana read the message twice, then composed her response. To the Galactic Council. The humans came here because someone asked for help. We fought because innocent people were dying. We are staying because the work is not finished. When the Zephyrians are safe and their civilization is secure, we will be happy to discuss treaties and protocols. Until then, we have more important things to do. She sent the message and returned to her work. The Zephyrian Collective, what remained of it, formally requested that humans establish a permanent presence in their system. The bird-like aliens had learned that there were species in the galaxy who would fight for others, who would sacrifice for strangers, who measured success not in profit or power but in lives saved. The agreement that emerged became known as the Zephyrian Human Mutual Defense Pact. It was the first treaty between humans and another species that bypassed the Galactic Council entirely. Other rim-world species, inspired by what they had witnessed, began reaching out to humanity directly. The galaxy was changing. The old order, based on cautious diplomacy and elegant restraint, was being challenged by a new philosophy that measured civilization not by technological advancement, but by willingness to protect the weak. Captain Si-hoon stood on his ship's observation deck, watching the first new Zephyrian city being constructed on the surface of their recovering homeworld. Human and alien architects worked side by side, creating something that belonged to both species and neither. His communications officer, Aram, joined him, carrying reports from across human space. Captain, we are receiving messages from dozens of species asking for human aid. Colonies under threat, trade routes being raided, worlds facing natural disasters. They all want to know if humans will help them too. Si-hoon smiled. And what did you tell them? I told them what Ambassador Hana would say. When someone calls for help, humans answer. Aram looked out at the construction work below. Are we going to become the galaxy's protectors? Is that what this means? Sehun considered the question. I do not know what we will become, but I know what we are. We are humans. We come from a dangerous world that taught us to fight for every day. We survive, but it also taught us that life is precious, that the strong must protect the weak, and that when someone calls for help, you answer. He gestured toward the mixed human and Zephyrian crews working together below. The galaxy called us Deathworlders as an insult. They were right about one thing: we are different. We grew up on a world that tried to kill us, so we learned to fight back. We learned to be stubborn, to be determined, to never give up when something important is at stake. A young Zephyrian child ran past the observation window chasing a human child in some game they had invented together. Both were laughing. But they missed the most important thing. Sehun continued. Earth made us hard, but it also made us protective. We fight so fiercely because we know what it means to lose everything.